Good morning. I'm Laurie Scott, the MPP for Haliburton, Kawartha Lakes Brock, and it's an honour to be here today for this significant announcement. I'm joined by Solicitor General Michael Kerzner, Laura Smith, MPP for Thornhill, Minister Tangri from Mississauga, and Deepak Anand, another MPP from Mississauga here, and Deputy Chief Nick Milinovich of Peel Region Police. We are also joined by the members of the family of Christopher Stevenson. This announcement is particularly important as it helps protect our most vulnerable citizens, including our children. I'm proud to be here today as this announcement has strong ties to the work that MPP Laura Smith and I began in the form of a private member's bill that would close the loophole that allowed convicted sex offenders under Christopher's law from making an application to change their name. We are so proud to be here today to support this proposed legislation, and I will now ask Minister Kerzner to speak.
Thank you, Laurie. Good morning, distinguished guests. It's great to be here in Peel Region once again for another important announcement, and I'm joined by many familiar faces and some new ones. As Solicitor General, my highest priority is the safety of the people of this province. I will never waver, compromise, or alter my focus and determination. And we as a government understand that when you have serious problems to solve, you need serious people to solve them. And that's why, under the leadership of our Premier, Doug Ford, we have led by example with legislation, with regulations, and with a steadfastness, commitment, and resolve to prioritize public safety. We have worked hand in hand with our partners, including with this flagship police service, and with police associations and many stakeholders across the province. Our government, led by Premier Ford, will not stop in keeping dangerous offenders, lawbreakers, and criminals off our streets. From auto theft and hate crimes to gun and gang violence, criminals in this province will not see us on the sidelines. As they say, you can run from a bully for only so long, but after a while you have to stand up to them. And that's exactly what we're doing. That's why we've spared no expense to crack down on violent and repeat offenders, as well as organized crime. And earlier this year, we announced that we're making one of the most significant increases in correctional capacity that our province has seen in years. We're adding more than 630 additional beds across the province in the short and long term. And yesterday, I was in North Grenville with Mayor Peckford and our government House Leader and local MPP Steve Clark to make it clear that we are proceeding on all fronts. And as I've said again, that if anyone across the province feels it's necessary to act in a criminal way, we have room for you in our jails. We will always put the safety of the people of Ontario first. We will always prioritize the rights of the public over the rights of the criminals, including those convicted of the most serious offenses. And we will never apologize for that. And Ontarians will always be able to count on us as their pillar and protector of our fundamental inherent right to live safely in our own homes and communities, so that we can always feel safe to wake up our kids in the morning and see them off to school, so that we can go to work, play in the park, shop, and pray safely. This inherent right is our grail. It will never be compromised. And we have been delivering on our commitment to public safety morning, noon, and night with a constancy that can be relied upon. We have been innovators in looking for practical solutions to put more boots on the ground, including right here in Peel, by dramatically expanding the enrollment at the Ontario Police College, adding a 4th intake each year, as well as expanding the size of each intake to over 520 cadets, a class, which translates into 2,080 new officers on our street each year, which is an increase, an unbelievable increase of over 600. And we're just getting started. And earlier this year, we announced a historic investment of $134 million to help our police services acquire 5 new helicopters, including one right here in Peel, providing eyes in the sky and ensuring criminals have absolutely nowhere to hide. But when it comes to public safety, we must always think of the most vulnerable. We must keep them safe from sex offenders. 24 years ago, another progressive Conservative government, under the leadership of Premier Mike Harris, passed Christopher's Law to protect the safety and security of the people of Ontario by establishing the first provincial sex offender registry. Any person who has been convicted of a designated sex offence must register with the sex offender registry, including individuals who've been convicted of sex crimes in other provinces. It gives police services access to the information and investigative tools they require to prevent and solve these awful crimes. And it enables law enforcement to pinpoint the name and addresses of every registered sex offender who lives near a crime scene. Ontario remains to this day the only province with its own sex offender registry. Ontario has one of the highest compliance rates of all sex offender registries at more than 94%. And today, sex crimes remain one of the most egregious out there. They are heinous and they're horrible. With instances becoming more and more frequent, there is growing concern, especially among law enforcement, that the Ontario Sex Offender Registry needs to be updated to respond to advancements in technology, including social media, which has become the recruitment tool of choice for human traffickers. Christopher's Law must be sharpened to ensure the Ontario Sex Offender Registry continues to be an effective tool in protecting the most vulnerable people. And very soon, very, very soon, our government will table legislation that will seek to keep Ontario streets and communities safe and hold offenders accountable for their actions. Amendments to Christopher's Law and the Ontario Sex Offender Registry will, if passed, give police services additional information that can help them prevent, investigate, and solve these crimes, including crimes committed online. And they include clarifying reporting obligations for sex offenders serving sentences in the community, requiring offenders to report information such as receiving a passport or driver's license within a fixed period of time, and catching up with changes in social media by requiring offenders to report information to police services within a prescribed period. When starting to use or making a change to an email, social media username, and other online identifiers. Adding new advanced travel reporting requirements, such as providing notice if they will be out of Canada for any length of time. We're also proposing to amend the Change of Name Act, which will prohibit sex offenders from changing their name while they have a reporting obligation to the Ontario Sex Offenders Registry. While there are safeguards in place, this will make it easier for police to monitor sex offenders and prevent them from using a new identity to commit crimes. If passed, amendments to Christopher's Law under the government's proposed legislation would give Ontario's police services access to expanded and timely information. Rest assured, our government will always work to keep vulnerable people and everyone in Ontario safe. We will be relentless every day of the year in pursuit of our public safety, no matter the danger, no matter the threat, and no matter the odds. Thank you. Merci beaucoup. Miigwech. It's my pleasure to call my colleague, our MPP from Thornhill, Laura Smith. Laura?
Thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. It's such an honor to be here with my caucus colleagues, including Minister Kerzner and MPP Laurie Scott, and the Stevenson family. You know, This is a significant announcement that will introduce amendments that will seek to enhance Christopher's Law, which is the basis for Ontario's Sex Offenders Registry. And today's announcement is quite simply positive news for Ontarians, specifically those of our most vulnerable, our children. So it provides for better monitoring of registered sex offenders. In my previous life, just a few short years ago, I dealt with matters under the Child Protection Act, and sadly I saw the underbelly of a system that dealt with the most heinous of offenders, those who committed crimes under Christopher's Law. And for those of you who do not know, Christopher was 11 years old when a convicted child molester with a heinous criminal record abducted the young boy from Peel Region from a Brampton, Ontario shopping mall. Fredericks, the offender, kept Christopher alive for 36 hours and assaulted him repeatedly before killing him and dumping his body. After years of advocacy, Christopher's parents, the Stevensons, advocated for Christopher's Law, and a provincial sex offender directory was created. But sadly, those who have committed those heinous acts, the most vile crimes against our most vulnerable people, our children, they're still at liberty to make application to change their names. And a new name provides a fresh start for these criminals. Something their victims will never have. These offenders under that registry should not be able to change their name. And as a government, we have a responsibility to put our efforts into protecting the victims, full stop. So for context, this will stop the Carla Homolkas of the world from becoming Leanne Teal. In the fall of last year, MPP Scott and I introduced our private members' bill, Bill 138, the Change of Name Amendment Act, to provide that these offenders under Christopher's Law should be ineligible to apply to change their name. As a politician and a mother, I know that closing this loophole for those who have committed one of the most reprehensible crimes against children was simply common sense. We also know that those who have committed these crimes have a high level of recidivism, meaning they are likely to commit these crimes again and again after incarceration. And as a government, I'm proud that the Solicitor General is taking a responsive look at our private members' bill, the Change of Name Amendment Act, and is accelerating its trajectory and fast-tracking our work by incorporating it into the new proposed legislation. I want to thank the Premier for his leadership and the support for our work. This legislation, if passed, will close the loophole and will strengthen our government's zero tolerance towards sexual assault, as well as reinforce our commitment to survivors, their families, and the groups that support them. I will now pass the microphone over to Deputy Chief Milanovic and Deputy Chief Nick. Thank you so much.
To begin, I would like to thank and welcome back Minister Michael Kerzner. He really is a champion for our police service and for community safety. I also want to recognize all of our Peel MPPs joining us here today, and a very warm welcome to MPPs Laurie Scott and Laura Smith. I would also like to recognize our Peel Police Services Board, Chair Nando Unica, Al Boughton, Omar Khan, and Executive Director Rob Serpe. And most importantly, I would like to recognize Mr. and Mrs. Stevenson, who are also here with us today. Mr. Stevenson, of course, to my left. Christopher was an 11-year-old boy, and his life ended tragically in 1988 while he was shopping with his family. At that time, Christopher was fatally abducted. A 45-year-old man with an extensive criminal record who had previously sexually assaulted 8 children and had been released from prison 2 months earlier was responsible for that crime. After suffering this incredible and unimaginable loss, Jim and Anna Stevenson pushed for an inquest into their son's death and began to advocate for change that would benefit other people. Their efforts ultimately resulted in a change to Ontario's laws and Canada's with the establishment of Christopher's Law, which is also known as the Ontario Sex Offender Registry. We, as a police service and a community, are profoundly appreciative to Mr. and Mrs. Stevenson for their advocacy and the work that they've done. Strengthening the reporting requirements of this legislation has and will continue to enhance our ability to protect our community and protect our children. We all, our police service and our community, owe Mr. and Mrs. Stevenson, our government, and our minister a debt of gratitude for doing that or attempting to do that. Currently in Peel, there are 750 registered sex offenders. 185 of them are considered high risk. Our numbers represent the second highest per capita numbers in Ontario. This is why the proposed changes and the current legislation are so important to our ability to protect our community. The additional reporting requirements will help police better monitor sex offenders' activities and establish further accountability for offenders. The 5 major amendments to Christopher's Law in the new legislation that the Minister plans on introducing focus on increasing the onus and stakes for offenders and making it more difficult for them to reoffend and avoid detection. New reporting structures and requirements, particularly those focused on online profiles, are essential. As we know, sexual predators are more and more often using online platforms to target our communities. The enhanced information is particularly valuable for our investigative units, such as our Offender Management Unit and our Internet Child Exploitation Unit. The new elements of the proposed legislation will strengthen the quality of information in the Sex Offenders Registry and once again enhances our ability to access accurate, up-to-date information, enabling police to identify and locate offenders. For our service, the amendments will support the work that we're doing. And the last time I saw the Stevensons, we talked about some of that work. Our police service since 2021 started Project Christopher. This is a proactive project that is oriented towards monitoring registered sex offenders and ensuring they're complying. So far this year alone, we have conducted 500 compliance investigations. Those compliance investigations have resulted in 36 arrests and 82 criminal charges. If you needed evidence of what this legislation can do to prevent harm to our community and to our children, I would supply that as evidence of the work that can be done by police when properly legislated and supported in doing so. We will never forget Christopher. We were in the museum earlier, and his picture is on the wall. He is part of the fabric that is our police service. And I want to say to you very personally, thank you for everything you've done for our community. Thank you. And with that, I will introduce Mr. Stevenson.
Thank you. Thank you. Good morning. Today's announcement of proposed amendments to Christopher's Law is wholeheartedly welcomed and supported by both my wife and I, who is with me here today. As outlined in the government's announcement, we agree that with the proposed amendments and that they will serve to provide police with further important information with which to investigate and solve sex crimes. Created in provincial legislation in 2001, largely in response to the 5.5-month-long inquest into the brutal and tragic death of our 11-year-old son on Father's Day in 1988, and a lengthy pursuit by my wife, victims groups, interested and caring members of the community, law enforcement personnel. The Christopher's Law has proven to be both highly useful and successful by all police services in the province. Today, Anna and I are particularly moved to know that Christopher's hockey image, which is on display here on the pin I have on my jacket, is readily identified with the Sex Offender Registry by police and members of the public. We are proud, too, of the relationship we are privileged to enjoy with the officers and staff members of the Ontario Sex Offender Registry Unit at OPP headquarters in Orillia, and for their commitment and dedication to the success of Christopher's Law and to the safety and the protection of the most valuable members of our community, our children. The initiative that has been announced, the planned initiative that has been announced today is meaningful in so many ways, and brings us to another place in our journey that began on that Father's Day weekend, and left us in deep grief. But grief can turn often to anger. In our case, we were fortunate that our anger turned to optimism, and today we are here announcing, or part of an announcement, making or strengthening legislation that was introduced in 2001 under the name of Christopher's Law, and has gone on to help so many people who might otherwise be victimized, or at least stopped their victimization. We thank the province, we thank police services, we thank victims groups who have supported us throughout this time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Stevenson.
Mr. Minister, thank you.
If you'd like to come and line up at the mic, state your name and outlet, and you can ask one question, one follow-up.
Hi, Minister. Laura Stone, Globe and Mail.
Good morning, Laura.
Good morning. I want to know if you have any concerns about legality of the changes that you're making today, if you think you might face any challenges, and if you would be willing to use the notwithstanding clause to prevent them.
I appreciate the question, Laura. I think when it comes to our record on public safety, on being bold, by sending a message that we're not going to accept the status quo of criminality, we will do what it takes and we will do what is hard. And that's why we've come forward today. We're moving forward. We're going to introduce the legislation, Laura, as I said, very, very soon. And we're not going to be timid. And we're not going to apologize for making public safety a priority. For the Premier, as you know, this is personal, morning, noon, and night. And together with my caucus colleagues, we are going to echo and amplify and send a message throughout Ontario that we will do what we need to do. We will do what is hard, but we will always move ahead with one priority in mind, the safety and well-being of everyone in Ontario.
So does that mean the door is open to potentially using that if need be?
Well, we're going to go forward with our piece of legislation where, if passed, it will become law. But we're moving forward, and we will table the legislation in the legislature, and we will debate it, and we will vote on it, and we will continue to send a message across Ontario that we don't want to have a young, beautiful boy like Christopher. We don't want to see a circumstance like this. And I can't mention enough, you know, how personal it is to me, the father of three. And I said to Mr. and Mrs. Stevenson when I met them today, last night I just wanted to hold my kids, and they're in their 20s. I just wanted to hold them that much closer.
And can I just hear your thoughts on what happened on Queen Street a few days ago with the kind of brazen shooting that we saw, teenagers involved, illicit guns, one of the teenagers now a suspect in a murder. What is happening in the city of Toronto, and how can such instances be prevented in terms of either the weapons or kind of the brazenness of what we saw?
I really appreciate the question. You know, I traveled to Yellowknife just a few weeks back for the federal, provincial, and territorial meeting on public safety and justice. And I said to my federal counterpart, Minister LeBlanc, and the Justice Minister, Minister Virani, meet me at the border and see for yourself that almost every gun that is used in an illegal activity in Ontario is traced back to the other side of the border. I've spoken about it in the legislature. The federal government has to hear what Premier Ford is saying. You have to step up the inspections and the protocols at the borders, at the Port of Montreal, at the intermodals, and recognize that when we put measures in place to curb illegal guns from coming into our province or exiting our province to be circled back again to come back in, we will reduce the number of guns. And to be honest, I've said it, I will continue to say it, and we have to get these illegal guns off our streets.
And when you answer, if you can look at the second camera where the hands are, if you don't mind. This is a question from John Woodward, W5CTV. W5 has explored the easy accessibility of high-tech devices that thieves are using to steal cars. Should the Ontario government take measures to restrict their possession just to licensed security professionals, as is done in other provinces?
Well, look, when it comes to fighting auto theft, our government takes it seriously. That's why the Premier appointed my colleague and friend, the member from Brampton North, Associate Minister McGregor, to tackle this with a laser-focused approach. We're going to work across ministries to make sure that whether it's Minister of Transportation or the Minister of Public Business Service Delivery and Procurement, we will leave no stone unturned. But the $51 million that we came forward with the auto theft grant, monies that have been helping Peel Regional Police Service crack these rings, we're not going to stop. And our message is simple because it goes back to the seriousness to which we take this. I traveled to the Port of Montreal in the summer, and I said, you have to ensure, I said this to the federal government, the protocols for incoming cargo, which is very, very specific. Treat the outbound cargo with the same level of scrutiny. They have an opportunity to step it up. They should step it up now.
Thanks, everyone. Speakers, please stay for a photo.
Thank you. Thank you very much.